legal container on blockchain in 1 second for $1 DAI. Han is the CEO of Autonomous and also a serial entrepreneur, and he's going to share how could we actually establish an American company in 1 minute and $1.
Hello, hi. So, my name is Han. I think you have an opposition leader here in Taiwan who's called Han. All right? Isn't there the guy from the south? Isn't he Han as well? Hey, Han. Thank you for being here also. Today we heard some of the hard lifting that Vitalik and the team are doing on the protocol level. We heard some other talks about ICOs and so on. This time I think we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to actually set up a company, a real world company, whilst we're here together. And so we built basically a way for people to what we call spin up legal containers at the push of a button. So I have 8 slides or so, and then we're going to run a little demo. Let me just get my slides open here. Okay. So a little bit about ourselves. So I've kind of been around from the early days of Ethereum, and as you can see, I'm a bit older than most of you here. And we have been helping a lot of people in the crypto and the blockchain space to set up legal entities. And so our main proposition is basically that we help you incorporate companies. And why the need to still incorporate companies? Because we feel that people realize that when they start with a project, very soon they discover that actually there is no way of continuing to work just informally without having the protection of limited liability. Because ultimately, if you do stuff in the real world, you will incur liabilities, and you better make sure you incorporate somewhere. You still need that tangent basically with a real world jurisdiction. So we're doing this in a number of jurisdictions. We're doing this in Hong Kong, Singapore, United States, the UK, some of the offshores like Cayman Islands. We do a lot of ICO work, STO work out of Cayman Islands. And so over summer, a couple of months ago actually, we started to think, hey, this is a big boring market. It's a lot of analog work and filing and so on. Isn't there a way to compress the time and the cost of setting up a legal entity? And so it very much overlaps, I think, with some of the work that Aragon is doing. One of the sponsors today we'll hear about later, and also Colony. And we like both a lot in that they help to layer the creation of an organization with technology and the blockchain. You want to think about Autonomous as that first mile bridge towards an entity that lives on blockchain. We actually concern ourselves about making it easier to incorporate a real-world entity that is licensed somewhere, at least registered somewhere. And so we have been spending some time over the last months trying to figure out, why can't we this whole legal thing where we're still working with share certificates in paper form and so on, why can't we make that a lot cheaper? Why hasn't technology actually reached that industry yet? And so then you actually discover that there's just blockers. There's real-world blockers in the way. And so one blocker is, I think, a blocker that we all encounter every day. It's called inertia. People are used to do things in a certain way, and they're a bit afraid of new technology, and they kind of go, oh, but what if these high priests of the legal profession are not longer involved? Will this still be a legally valid entity if we do this on blockchain? And then the second blocker you quickly encounter, and anybody doing stuff in DeFi will experience that as well, is that you often have vested interest in monopolies. In the case of company incorporation, I'm not familiar with Taiwan, for instance, but I'm pretty sure that you too have a government-sanctioned registry where you have to file for the incorporation of a company. It's the same in the United States, it's the same in Hong Kong, it's the same in Cayman Islands, it's the same in Singapore. You have these monopolies from a state that basically says, if you want a birth certificate for your company, the only entity that can issue that is a government-sanctioned entity. So how do you get around those blockers? How can you actually compress both the time to incorporate and the cost of incorporation? And I kind of think that we cracked it. And the way we cracked it, I've been thinking about an analogy, and I think the best analogy is in vitro fertilization. It's basically test tube babies. So what we came up with is a smart contract cascade where via, forgive me the word, but the insemination of a certain amount of cryptocurrency, in this case DAI, you let the baby grow in the test tube, and the baby is basically the company. And so you make it easier for people to spin up a real entity. So the sequence would be that, for instance, Vitalik, I can look over there, that Vitalik were to send one DAI, so the equivalent of $1 to a smart contract. In this case, it's called autocorporate E via the name server. That smart contract is gonna generate a new smart contract that contains the operating agreement of a new LLC. In this case, this would be an LLC in Delaware. Okay, and so what we're actually doing here is we are replicating the due process that has to be followed in the real world, in the analog world, in order to form a company, but we're compressing the time and the cost of doing so. So this is basically the moment where it can all go wrong, because I'm going to try to demo this to you. And just to make sure that it works faster, we have done this on Robston for now. Okay. You see, as I said, this is typically where it goes wrong. You see, I'm not connected to. I'm on crosslink Taiwan, so. Which one? Okay. Okay. Close your eyes, guys. Okay, there we go. So basically the first thing you have to do is the same with babies. You need to give them a name. So you need to come up with a name for your company. If you have a project, anybody of you who wants to spin up a company will probably first start with a name. So what we've done is we built a very simple API with a database of names of Delaware LLCs in the United States. By the way, Delaware is the biggest jurisdiction in the world. 500 million companies a year are being set up in Delaware. And so let's say we were to choose a name that you want to call your company Citibank. We'll check if it's available, and guess what? It's not available, because there is a company called Citibank LLC already in Delaware. But say we wanted to call our company something else, for instance, water bottle, water bottle LLC, because you're selling water bottles. Good news, that company is actually available. Is this visible at all? Because I know it's a little bit dark. I can zoom in a little bit. But the short of the story is that you get a confirmation that the name is available, so you can basically call your baby water bottle. What do you do next? Next, you're going to have to connect your MetaMask. Soon you'll be able to work also with your hardware wallets and so on. So we're connecting MetaMask here. So far, so standard. This is not what it should be doing. Okay, this is already connected. It is effectively going wrong. One second, guys. I'm just playing up a little bit here. Okay, so we'll do this again. Water bottle is still available. By the way, I don't know if you can see, but you actually immediately get a registered address in Delaware, so that's a service that we provide, because the only requirement you have to incorporate in Delaware is that you actually have a registered address there. This is not stable here. I think it's the internet connection, so let me go back to... We did test this before, it worked all right, and it seems the internet is playing up. Okay. So I'm back on the other Wi-Fi now. Maybe we do that again, I apologize. It's always good that we can blame it on the internet, but I do actually think it is the internet. But now it seems to be fine. Not sure. Nope. It seems like it's keeping on.
Any problem?
There's something here. Try this once more, guys, and if not, I'll just walk you through it. It's one of these things, it seems like my browser keeps on refreshing, right? Turn the shield down. Thanks, Yao. Let's see. No, I don't think it's going to do it. Well, this is obviously a bit embarrassing, but we did try this before. I'm not quite sure what's going on. It seems everything is falling apart. But essentially, let me just walk you through the sequence. What would happen here is that you would connect your MetaMask. You would basically, this is basically the sequence, you would basically send that DAI transaction to the autocorp.eth smart contract. The autocorp.eth smart contract is basically that incubator that spins up a new smart contract, and that new smart contract is effectively the operating agreement of your company. So the first owner of the company, and this is probably the key legal breakthrough that we've achieved after many back and forths with the council in the United States, the key legal breakthrough is that a company doesn't have to necessarily be owned by a physical person. We have it actually confirmed that you can own a company through a wallet, a cryptographic wallet that you control. And so the way you manage to compress the time of spinning up a company is by having, instead of an owner sign some certificate of formation of an LLC, that it is by signing the transaction that you control a wallet that controls the smart contract for the company. Now you'd say, you know, what's the point here? Well, the point is that this is probably an on-ramp towards bigger things. And this is where lots of work has been done also by other teams in the community to look at, for instance, what's next on the funding side. How can we also automate the funding? We now have an on-chain company with a real-world legal wrapper. Can we now also automate the funding? And I think it's going to be Luis from Aragon who's going to show us a little bit the solution that they have engineered there. There's also government stuff that you can start smart contractifying. So although we are only addressing at this stage the first mile problem of getting a real world wrapper around your project or even your smart contract, you can actually see this grow into a fully automated of funding and governing your company. There's a lot of documentation on autocorp.autonomous.com for those who want to dig into some of the legal questions that this is throwing up. For instance, there is often questions on KYC. There's often questions on, is this actually a limited liability company? Do I have an actual company? So I'm more than happy to take any questions right now if we still have some time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much for your sharing. Do we have any questions from the audience? If you do have questions, please raise your hand. Yes, gentleman at the back.
Yeah.
It's actually not a question, but more of a testament, because I started a company on autonomous about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So thank you. It was amazing.
Okay, great.
It was registered in Singapore. Yeah.
So we've been around, and as I was saying, I do this more for the love of God and the crypto community. We've set up a lot of very visible names. We don't name clients, but I think a lot of the bigger names in the community have set up companies with us. So we're kind of a sad bunch in that we just love this puzzling out the jurisdictions and what works better for our clients. It's really as a result of this work that we got to the frustration of, my goodness, does this always have to be so analog? And we think that you can actually compress it in time and cost, and that give it another couple of years and we're going to see companies being spun up directly on chain, but still with that requirement, because that's not going to go away. If you want limited liability, you're going to have that real world wrapper. And anybody who does stuff here with smart contracts and so on, I'd like to maybe put one note of caution, is that you do want to have a company eventually to do this in, because otherwise your effort may be seen as unlimitedly liable for whatever could go wrong. And so that's just a reason why you want to quickly even wrap a single smart contract into a limited liability company, for instance. Thanks for the testimony.
Thank you very much.
That's the kind of questions we like to receive, by the way. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Yeah, when you register, do you get a tax ID like EIN?
Can you say that again?
Tax.
For example, if you register LLC in Delaware,
yeah,
you should get a tax ID, right?
But actually, it's a very good point you raised. You don't. At least you don't to get the birth certificate for your company. To get your company incorporated, you don't need a tax ID. And this is why we actually do love the United States, because there is no KYC involved whatsoever when you set up a company, in contrast with a lot of countries. For instance, in Europe, you need to have a notary involved, which is a total pain, right? But a notary is effectively that sort of person who needs to check on who you are. In Singapore, in Hong Kong, you need to basically disclose who you are with attested documents that you are who you are before you can incorporate. In the United States, because of tradition or what have you, you basically have to declare who you are. You could actually incorporate a company in the United States saying that you're Mickey Mouse. You can. There's no check whatsoever on your identity, which is why this works in the United States, and we believe it's going to work in some other places outside as well. Only at the point that you start doing real-world stuff, for instance, opening a bank account, will you be asked by the system to attest to your real-world personality. So we are perfectly fine to have you spin up a company where the owner is effectively a wallet address, a public address, of your wallet.
Yes, actually my question is the company's tax ID,
Mm-hmm.
EIN. So,
Yeah.
so you don't...
You don't need it at the moment of inception, of incorporation, but later down the line, if you want to open a bank account, you want to start hiring employees, you want to build it as a real operational entity, you will need a tax ID in the United States.
Oh, okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
By the way, just on this, anybody who wants a tax-optimized vehicle and is not from the United States or lives in the United States should have a good look at the LLC, because it's actually very good from a tax perspective. But you can come and see me afterwards if you want to hear more.
Lovely. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Raise your hand
Nobody
if you
else?
have any questions. No?
Good stuff.
Would you like to try with them? Yes?
I can try again. Maybe I just close my browser and do it all over again. 1 second. We still have some time.
那接下来呢，我们的下一个议程呢，会是在2点55分开始。那现在呢，我们请讲者再开一下刚刚还没有完成的 demo， 看看我们的 internet connection 会不会好一点。那我们的下一个议程呢，会是比较像是一个 panel discussion， 一个座谈会。我们 们要讨论的是怎么样子建立一个开发者社群，有什么样的挑战跟经验的分享。
Okay, so let's see if this works now. So we're spinning up water bottle again. We're connecting our MetaMask. I close the browser. I may have to enter my password for my MetaMask. I should look at my developer here in the room, so I can blame somebody for this. Okay, let me do this now. No. Maybe something.
What a shame.
Yes, it is actually.
Oh.
Yeah, it keeps on doing the same loop. But anyhow, we'll see if we can demo to anybody who wants to see it live offline outside. But thanks very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
我们谢谢看。如果大家之后想要再看他的 demo 的话呢，可以私下再去找他。那我们的下一个议程呢，会是在2点55分，我们的座谈会会将开始。Thank you very much。那我们的座谈会呢，会邀请到6位的讲会语者来做分享。Our next session will be panel discussion, and the topic will be developer community building, a challenge and experience sharing. And the session will start at 2:55. So please feel free to take a few minutes break. I will be right back.
Hi Frank, how are you?
我们现在呢，先稍作休息一下。我们2点55分呢，会再次回到现场，然后继续我们的座谈。如果大家有照相，或者是想要跟其他的朋友一起分享的话呢，请记得在我们的 social media 上面 #crosslink_Taiwan。那也要请大家记住，你们的手环是我们这2天的入场券，请你一定要好好的珍惜它。那这样子，明天呢，我们晚上呢还有一个 after party， 请大家带着手环一起来跟我们参加。
先生。
Hello. Are you guys ready for our panel discussion? Ooh, let's make some noise. Yay. Okay. Our panel discussion will be developer community building challenges and experience sharing. 那我们的座谈会呢，将会是以建立开发者社群的挑战及经验分享。那我们今天呢，总共邀请到了6位的分享者。那呢，我现在就将我的麦克风交给我们的志成。Let me give my microphone to 志成, and 志成 will be the moderator for this panel discussion. And 志成 is from Ethereum researcher, right? Okay.
Thank you very much. Hello, thank you to join this panel. This is an easy one. It's not like no technical part, but I think everyone spent a lot of time and efforts on this topic. But before we begin this panel, I want to poll the audience. So who here consider yourself a developer? Okay. And who here think yourself is not a developer? And who here wants to be a developer? Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, amazing. So, yeah, we are honored to have our great panelists. let me introduce Albert Ni from the Ethereum Foundation. And Foundation has been working on supporting developers and the ecosystem. And Liam Horn from L4 and notably East Global. East Global hosts hackathons all over the world, and we'll learn a story. And Yuriko from Plasma Lab, but she built an amazing student society in college. And Raul, I invited as a project owner, so to learn about when developers work on a project and how the project need to attract talents to the code base. And finally, we have Scott Moore, and maybe you have attended to Scott's previous previous talk, and Scott has a lot of funding model and sustainability model for open source projects. So now that each panelist share their stories. Start from Albert.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Chicheng. I'm Albert from the Ethereum Foundation. As you would expect, we think a lot about developer, really every aspect of developer communities, not just growing the developer communities, but also helping existing developers be more impactful. So I'm very looking forward to just hearing the thoughts from everyone else on this panel. I feel like a big part of my job is to hear as much as I can from different perspectives, and hopefully we at the Ethereum Foundation can use that to do better at supporting the ecosystem.
Hello, I'm Liam from ETH Global. In college, I started this thing called Hack the North, which became the largest collegiate hackathon in the world, where every year nearly 1,500 students from around the world go to Canada and build projects on all kinds of different things. It wasn't Ethereum specific, it was just a general hackathon. And I noticed that there was a trend in Ethereum where you could get an enormous number of people, like you are all a representative of today, interested in the technology to come and build something together over a weekend. And so that's what the genesis idea was behind ETH Global. So like you mentioned, we run these hackathons all over the world, literally in Paris, Berlin, Buenos Aires, San Francisco, Singapore. And we get developers like you that want to build on Ethereum. And so I've obviously seen a lot of growth in this industry, and I think it's a really interesting time to be working on this stuff.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuriko. I'm currently taking a gap year from my university and working full-time at a company called Crypto Economics Lab, building an L2 application framework. Before starting working at Crypto Economics Lab, I was running a student group, research and development blockchain student group at my university. It's Waseda University in Tokyo. During that time, I was facing a lot of challenges to including a lot of developers, students who are interested in blockchain space. So I'm excited to hear everyone's opinion on it and to discuss it. Thank you.
Hi everybody, this is Raul. I work for a company called Protocol Labs in the Lib2B project. If you're not familiar with Protocol Labs, you might have heard about Lib2B itself, IBFS or Filecoin. The technology that we build tends to be directed and targeting the infrastructural pieces of the decentralized stack. So for us, it tends to be very difficult to get people and developers really engaged and to understand those deep layers of the stack and get really engaged and pumped up and excited about contributing to those. Where the ecosystems that we're building are very open. We have created these projects, but we don't consider ourselves the owners of these projects, particularly of Lib2B. Lib2B is being adopted by a large number of downstream users, including Ethereum 2.0. as a strong, rock-solid networking layer that powers the protocol itself. So I'm super excited about this panel. It's been, as I say, it's very difficult for Protocol Labs to engage people and to market the importance of the technology that we build in, which is not always visible. It doesn't have a visible head, it doesn't have a UI, so it's very difficult for people to understand what it's about. So yeah, super excited about this panel.
Cool. I'm Scott Moore. I work on a project called Gitcoin, which helps you sort of sustain your open source projects in a variety of ways. We actually got started in a very similar way to Liam, and in fact have sort of history with ETH Global. A lot of our early work was sort of started around the first ETH Waterloo in Waterloo, Canada. And we've been really focused on not only trying to solve this like sustainability problem, but also figuring out ways to get more Web 2 developers actually engaged in Web 3. There's usually a bit of a gap in learning and understanding, and by sort of creating these good first issues, these easy ways for people to get engaged, this is a way that we see our role in building the developer community kind of flourishing.
Okay, that was fast. And then, so my first question is that, so you can, as you can see, the panelists here are like, they're having their core tasks. They are like busy on their own projects, but like they have some like time to allocate to the community building. But what are some efforts like you always want to do but have no resources like time or funding or like friends to bring more talents to the ecosystem?
Sure, I think when you talk about what we wish there was more time and resources for, there's so many different areas, because I think one of the biggest challenges for any new space is quality beats quantity every time in terms of getting people interested. So each person, it's really like one or two big things that suddenly makes them go from maybe interested to very interested. And one of the big challenges is how do you kind of customize for different types of people so that the thing that they might not realize they should know about the blockchain space, how do you make them aware of that? But if you want to do that scalably, you can't just sit down with everybody individually and learn what their interests are and learn what motivates them. And so, almost by definition, there's always more ways that more resources can be used to help grow the ecosystem. I think more concretely, one thing that I think a lot about, and even the local grants program that we talked about earlier as an example, is how to find, instead of making it so that you have to join the entire blockchain or Ethereum ecosystem, how do you make it a little bit easier and kind of safer for people to get started? And sometimes that means making it a little bit smaller, finding a local community. It could be at a university, it could be at a hackathon. I know personally just having dinner with some friends, and I think doing more to make it easier for other people to do that. So I'm not going to tell you how to have dinner with your friends, but maybe we can give you some suggestions for how to organize it so you can focus on the hard part, which is the specific group of friends that you know best. So those are some of the things that I always wish there was just way more resources so we could go to every city in the world, we could go to every virtual community in the world. But I think we can do better at making it easier for people in those communities to bootstrap more. And so that's one of the things that we're thinking a lot about at the Ethereum Foundation nowadays.
Yeah. Okay. So peer-to-peer networking, which is what the B2B focuses on, has been pretty niche for the last few decades. And as more platforms have been built, more decentralized assets have been built, and public goods for the world, more developers are realizing that having important, rock-solid foundations and having stable technologies where we can all collaborate to build a great networking layer that a lot of projects can rely on is important. So making the leap, between peer-to-peer networking being like a pretty niche topic in the engineering side of things to making it more mainstream, getting people excited, that kind of outreach, that kind of technical communication, you know, and we are a bunch of engineers in the LibB2B team at Protocol Labs, right? And engineers don't precisely like writing documentation, blogging, and communicating outwards, and putting the focus on that is a huge linchpin to be able to untap and to unlock a lot of potential that there is in the developer community in the world, if only they knew that their work, if they spent and invested, you know, their time and resources in learning this technology and contributing to it because it's open source, that would unlock a lot of value for everybody that's building decentralized platforms, right? Because it's this thing that networking, peer-to-peer networking is this thing that underpins everything else, right? And you can't build robust decentralized platforms if the network is fragile.
Just to add to what's been said, I fully agree with both points that have been made already. I think I would add like mentorship as one core component that is also really hard to scale. Like you can't easily just get like mentors in every local community to just like volunteer and pop up. But I think if we can find ways to try to get more of those people engaged and maybe incentivize them more to be mentors, I think that's super valuable and like powers basically helps solve this problem that Will was talking about too, where like it's not really common for most people to be dealing with like, this level of granular like network stack work when they're like entering their development career. So it's like hard for a new developer to really engage in this ecosystem in like an effective way. And if we can make it easier for them, I think that's better for the ecosystem overall.
I would say one of the things that I wish that I had in the ecosystem of Japan from a perspective of student, we kind of lack technical professors who are knowledgeable on the technical side of blockchain, and it was kind of tough to find a professor who can be responsible for my student club, and in the end we got to find this professor from a law department who's researching anti-money laundering and stuff like that, but it was kind of tough to find a CS background, a professor who has a computer science background. And I wish they can open up more classes for students who are interested in learning blockchain technology but new to the space.
I think Scott brings out a really pain point. I've been hearing of many blockchain developer and researchers. They complain about mentorship. It's like the lack of mentorships. There's they have to search and figure out things themselves, but it's really difficult to get professional to get some advice. I'm not sure if you have some experience or comments for mentorship. Or your program projects provide some mentorship.
So one aspect is, well, speaking from an open source project, we try to make the community itself, or at least the people who make the B2B or IPFS, Falcon, and so on, they're basically the core part of the workday, right? Because we work in Protocol Labs, we try to be very welcoming to everybody that tries to, either find an issue or open a pull request or whatever, and we try to provide that level of mentorship for people to, whenever you file a pull request, even if it's not mergeable straight away, it's not a matter of just getting your code to be a contribution, but it's also we take that as an opportunity to help instruct or teach people on how to do future contributions as well to the project, or things that they haven't immediately spotted that could turn into bugs or whatever. So make that a learning experience for them as well as for us, right? Because at the end of the day, open source is a two-way street, right? So that continued level of mentorship, I think it's important in open source communities, right? For the collaboration aspect to prosper.
One thing I'll mention is that in Ethereum, something that's really unique is that there's very few gates that prevent you from collaborating with and working with literally the people on the bleeding edge. In a lot of other places, it's the case that if you want to work with the leading researcher in some area, you have to go through a bunch of hoops, maybe attend some institution, and it's just hard. But in Ethereum, if you just take the time to understand what the latest work is and you write a post on ETH Research, pretty much immediately you're going to be chatting with Vitalik and they're going to be taking your ideas very seriously. So I would definitely take advantage of that, especially if you're like an up-and-coming student or someone that wants to build a research career. Ethereum is a phenomenal place to go from, no one ever having heard of you to immediately becoming one of the most well-known people if you put in the time and effort. And I've seen countless people in this space do that. And one even strategy for that, if you're seriously considering that, is take one of the ideas that are kind of vaguely out there right now and write it up into a very well-structured paper that goes through all the details. There's one guy I know that did this really well. He wrote up a paper for the plasma cache construction. He just took what was out there in talks and in ETH research posts and just wrote a formalization of it. And that became the standard description of plasma cache, and now it's used as a reference in all kinds of other papers, and he's now well known as being like the layer 2 guy. So anyone can do this if you just take the time and put in the effort.
I think one of the things that's really interesting, as Liam mentioned, there are very few hard gates in Ethereum, things that are hard obstacles, and so what you're left with are soft gates, things that exist maybe because you personally put it on yourself or even culturally. And so one thing that we've thought a lot about in the Ethereum Foundation is if you look at different cultures around the world, different cultures will have a different style for how they will approach new problems and new areas. One of the reasons we focused the local grants program on Asian communities at first is because we know that, at least stereotypically, in a lot of Asian cultures, people are uncomfortable kind of asking questions or getting involved until they feel like they're already an expert. But this is in a fast-moving new space, no one is really an expert, so part of it is about getting out of your own comfort zone for how much confidence you need to have to move forward. That said, not everybody can be expected to approach the problems in the same way. And so I think one of our big challenges that we would like your feedback from is, how can we go to different areas and make it so that moving one step out of your comfort zone is enough to make progress. Right now, I think in some cultures, you'd have to move 5 steps out of your comfort zone, whereas in others, you only have to move 1 or 2. And so that's why a lot of the research and progress is dominated by those areas where you only are moving 1 or 2. And so thinking in terms of how many steps outside of one's comfort zone they need to move to be a contributor and how we can build the bridges around those steps, that's something that we care a lot about, and we're going to need the feedback from everybody in every area so that we can provide better options for that.
Just adding to Albert's comment, I just want to share my own experience with other students, if there are some of the students are here. At the time that I joined the space, I literally knew nothing, but I was just curious what's going on in the space. And last summer, I went to this conference in Hong Kong, and I just went talk to this person called Virgil.
Hello.
Virgil Griffith. He's one of the managers at Ethereum Foundation. I didn't know he was that special person at the time, but he treated me very nicely, and he introduced me some of the very professional researchers. I jumped into the space, and a lot of the professional researchers helped me through learning some of the new things, and that helped me a lot. So I was doing the exact same thing that Albert was saying. I got out of my comfort zone. I was making an effort to new things that I didn't know at all. So please join the space with your courage, and it's gonna be super fun. So.
I just want to quickly add to Liam's point, and I think that's a really good story. I would just say, like, in addition to like research, just looking at like what's out there, like that's of interest to you in terms of like on GitHub, like what projects are interesting to you, what protocols are interesting to you, just like opening up issues or just working with existing issues and trying to like open up PR for them is a really good starting point. And like there's nothing stopping you if you want to go and like do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the previous points here. I think if you realize this space is being built as we speak, right, and it's being built every single day, and the people who are building it tend to be the ones that are presenting their own work at conferences, the meetups, and so on. So, don't be afraid to reach out to them and speak to the people about the work that they're presenting, because in many cases they are the authors and they're interested as well in, like, they are invested in it and they're happy to continue, elaborating on that topic, exploring ideas with you, helping you, helping onboard you into that topic to continue contributing. So don't be afraid to like break that barrier, break the ice, because generally, like, you might feel that there is, some kind of blocker that does never exist. There's no blockage, right? And in most of the cases, it doesn't exist because, as I say, people want to speak about the work, and at the end of the day, everything that's being built here, most of the things are open source, right? So they're built on the principle of collaboration, and they're built on the principle of getting a community together to continue evolving it as one.
Yeah, I think okay. So I think there are like the soft gate is the challenge of the entry barrier of entry to the system, and I think Yuriko's example is really good. Like talk to people, but as Scott says, you try to like explore all the open source project, but most of the project in ecosystem, like, they are really like hard to understand, or like P2P is like you need to like understand the blockchain, and then you start to appreciate the value of like the P2P layer. But how do you like get the new contributors to start to appreciate those like niche project and like get started with it?
I have one way to answer that, which is the best way to get in is to try to build something like in the shortest time frame you can imagine. Like, what can you get done in like 7 days? Just set a hard deadline for yourself. I want to build some project which takes advantage of blockchains in 7 days. And then when you start to do that, you're going to be forced to figure out all these different elements of your project. There's probably going to be some peer-to-peer messaging component. You're going to figure out the UI, how do you interact with wallets, how is the contract designed, like the whole system you have to figure out. Just try to set a limit to yourself in 7 days to get something, literally anything built. And by doing that, you'll realize, oh shit, there's like a lot of stuff in this industry, and that's when you understand why there's so many people doing stuff. So yeah, the best way is just like understand one project really well, and you'll find all these pieces in the process.
And to do that, maybe it's better to join one of the hackathons, like ETH Global host. I just recently joined ETH Boston that happened last month, and it was very good experience. A lot of projects were providing their own product so that everyone can utilize that product into their product they are building during the hackathon. So it's maybe easier for intermediate beginners.
Yeah, so from a project perspective, I think it's on us to make it easy for people to actually get acquainted enough, and people have different styles, right? And people have different learning styles and ways that they want to ramp up to understand a particular set of technologies. Some of them want to get into building straight away, others want to be able to read technical documentation up front, to like figure out all the different elements in their mind, to then start reading code and actually start developing with that piece. So we need to cover all of these bases as projects, right? And that in some cases is challenging, right? So one model that I like a lot is self-serve. So if we use platforms, for example, like Gitcoin, or other platforms, or even in hackathons, global hackathons and so on, we encourage people to we give them enough information by our workshop within those hackathons and so on, to give them enough information so that they can start exploring the code base, so they can start exploring a project, and then they themselves writing documentation that would be essentially for them. But if it's for them because they're new people in this project, then it's probably readable by a lot more people of their same level, right? So we can use that, kind of like the dog feeding aspect of writing documentation for oneself to then push it out to the crowd, right? That is one good way of onboarding people. Projects need to make it very easy so that minimize the friction, so that when there's a potential contributor that might be potentially interested in your project that would not like to hack with it but would like to build inside it, so instead of actually using it as a library, you would, in the case of Lippy2B, there are users that are more interested in building Lippy2B itself and like playing with DHTs and PubSub and playing with handshake protocols and multiplexing and so on, than actually building applications right on top of Lippy2B. That's particularly my case, right? That's why I work on the project itself. To make it easy for those people, they need to have one place where they can go and see everything that needs their help in the project, right? And this could be GitHub issues that are tagged specifically, which then get promoted, for example, via bounties in Gitcoin or whatever. But there's a lot more things that can be done, and I think the projects really need to level up in this, particularly Lippy2B.
Just to add, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like documentation, I just want to like really hit home that it's kind of our bad as a community in part. Like our documentation is not that good, and tutorials are not that good. Like I think this is more of an ask to the community. But if you do happen to go through Liam's like steps and like build your own project, just really making sure that you have good documentation and making sure that you have like almost, if you could write a tutorial for it, I think that'd be super helpful. Often you'll find that like when you search for a certain topic, it'll be out of date by like maybe a year or so. There'll be like a Medium article or something, and like that is something we need to rectify. So we definitely are working on that, but that's a call to action for the community as well to add to that.
Albert, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I guess the only thing I have to add, people have said so many great things here, so I'll just go in a different direction and remind everyone that it's okay to go at your own pace. I think what's wonderful about this ecosystem is it's new, it's growing. There will be many, many years of like great changes and improvements to come. I know that especially nowadays, it always feels like you have to rush into everything. It's like you're gonna miss your chance. I felt like I missed blockchain and Ethereum when I first got interested in 2016, right? So everyone feels that way at first, but you have to go at your own pace. And it's the opposite of running out of things to do. There's going to be more things to do. It's going to be easier to get started. So when you are feeling ready and maybe energized to do more than like following and reading, you've heard a lot of good ideas from this group. But yeah, like in 2020 and 2021 and so on, there's just going to be even more here. So, take your time if you need it.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good advice. And I'm thinking taking question from the audience. Any questions?
So hi, I'm Vinny. So I'm kind of like co-organizer for this event. So I'm just wondering, because we're talking about, developer community, and my background is actually from startup. So in startup, we're talking about ecosystem, but it's pretty similar things. But I'm just wondering, Taiwan, we have really good, engineer, group, and then we have, different kind of language, community, and they're doing pretty well. I'm just wondering, for developer, is there sort of there, you recall just saying, you think if Japan got more professor teaching school, and that might be get more students understand blockchain. So I'm just wondering, as a, Taipei Ethereum meetups, co-organizer, I'm just wondering, is there sort of the way to sort of build, community there by there, and then how do we sustain the, system? So Zhichen or, our major, organizer, they have to, answer all different kind of, questions, but, would be easier to just say, anyway, my idea just is there, structure for developer to kind of learn by themselves, and then, to learn as a group, that kind of thing. Thanks.
I don't have the answer to the entirety of the layering, but one small thing that you guys could do that I would recommend doing is run a hackathon. Yeah, really just imagine everyone in this room, instead of watching us talk, we're talking amongst each other and working on projects on their laptops together, and at the end of the day they all present what they built. That's a really fast way of learning a lot of the things that maybe you don't realize you could learn much quicker than it seems. So that's my one recommendation.
In terms of nurturing a good developer community, I would add. I actually got the same question from a person from Ethereum Foundation before. Why isn't there a good developer community in Japan? Even though it seems there are a lot of good developers individually who are interested in blockchain, and I think. It took me a while to think about the question. I couldn't answer the question immediately, but now that I think, there is not a lot of knowledgeable investors, venture capitals, who can invest on this product or technology. There aren't a lot of good startups who can invest their times on their protocol research, and then there is not a lot of good protocol developer community here. So it's like a notorious cycle coming from the venture capital, not good funding resource. So maybe one thing we wish to have in Japan, as well as maybe Taiwan, is a good venture capital funding resource who are not knowledgeable on the protocol itself.
Yeah, those are very good points. Another aspect that I would like to add is one thing that's amazing about being part of this ecosystem is the fact that you get to work on global technologies with a global team that's spread across the world that mixes so many different cultures, so many different languages, so many different approaches about how to think, in terms of thinking about things, reasoning through, and communicating. It's just it's just mind-boggling that any developer anywhere in the world can participate in this global ecosystem, right? And I think not a lot of developers have realized this, in the sense that I come from a small island in Spain, right? And most people who are studying at university, most people who are studying, for the future, they get told that they have to look for a job, normally in the same place where they work, or they have to relocate. But the fact that being a developer, being an engineer in this particular set of technologies gives you unlimited access to work for any company that in the world, or any project, or build your own project, or participate in open source communities, structure your day in whichever way that you want to structure it and get incentivized for it. That's just amazing, right? And so reducing that friction between as a developer, what do I invest in learning, right? So that it will get me somewhere in the future. And to make those developers realize that by learning this, they can literally, like they have, a limited pathway to the future. I think that is, a potential linchpin as well.
All right, I think time is almost up. Okay.
Yeah, I think that concludes. Okay. Oh, because we have a break, and so we can take another one questions from the audience. So, anyone? Okay.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to ask this question since I'm one of the staff here. My name is Jun, and I'm a researcher, and also I'm one of the co-organizer of the Taipei Fair Meetup, and I just came back from DevCon as well. So I would like to give you a feedback and a small question about hackathon things. So the feedback is, so I heard Raul says, when you are trying to attend some of the conferences, you can always approach the speaker and share your new ideas. This mindset is kind of different from how the Asian students behave, because we normally just think there's a gap and there's a distance between the instructor and the student. It's not easy for students from Asia to take that leap, because you gotta we're supposed to we used to try to build more confidence on what we already have to have the courage to approach to the instructor. So I think that this kind of mindset is pretty important. To all of us here in this room. And as a co-organizer from Taipei Meetup, I think one of the challenge is to bring the information and technology itself to the newcomers. And this is actually hard because we already run the community for 2 years, 3 years. And we were doing video taping, we just record everything on the speech, and then we would post on video. But the audience not that much. So we then tried another approach, which is we write an articles, whether it's an intermediate level or a more advanced articles. But still, these contents are not really getting into the audience. It's not really well known yet. So maybe the hackathon is the next step we should take. So I would like to hear more opinions from ETH Global. And so you said this is basically the best way to bring in developers together and figure out something, learn new stuff. So is there any outcome afterwards? Like, for example, any content that sort of in a well-curated sense, so that the people who are going to join the next hackathon is going to reuse that kind of content? Or is there any ideas that you were going to conduct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it might be the case that hackathons are kind of the best way of iterating on people's understanding of the technology, because they are not structured exactly. Maybe it's really hard to record videos of everything and have that always be up to date, or write articles and keep that always being up to date. But at the hackathon, the model is just show up repeatedly at these types of events and just talk to people. And in the discussions, you will learn a lot. And then when you have a problem, you just go to the guy across the hall, ask them, how do I do this thing? And they'll give you the latest up-to-date answer on the spot. And so it's the fact that it's this time and place wherein all of your questions will be answered in a relatively short time frame, because everyone's in the room together, that enables you to have a really fast knowledge transfer, as opposed to written documents or videos, which theoretically are better. They're just in practice really hard to maintain. So at least in my experience, hackathons are just good for that reason. It's a very special time and place where things can be learned fast. And in terms of outcomes, we do actually produce a lot of video content. If you go to our YouTube, we have tons and tons of videos, and we try to add more from every event that are more of snapshot. We look at it more as a snapshot in time, as opposed to the de facto description of this technology. So there's a lot of content that gets produced, and then at the end of the day, it's the relationships that are formed that are also really valuable. So a good example is Gitcoin. Scott, at the end of the panel here, he met his co-founders at one of these hackathons. And so as a good output of the actual hackathon, or there's more teams in the industry now with a shared vision and a shared understanding of what they want to do together. So there's a lot of reasons. I can keep talking for ages about why hackathons are great. There's a lot of reasons why they're valuable, and I think they just they gloss over all these issues that you described in a way that produces some value, maybe not the perfect value, but some good value for everybody.
So
Any chance you're going to Taipei soon?
We literally have you name a top 100 populated city in the world. We have an email in our inbox of somebody that wants to run a hackathon there. I don't think we need to be the gatekeepers. If you guys want to run ETH Taipei, then run ETH Taipei. We'll definitely find a way to support you. We're just trying to run as many events as we can in places that we feel confident we can structure it logistically. But there should definitely be an ETH Taipei. Whether it's us or you guys independently running it, that's a different question.
Sweet, thank you.
So if we are running a hackathon, what's the advice for our organizers?
Yeah, I think that's a really long answer. I think if you guys follow up with me afterwards, I can give you the playbook and help you out.
I think that concludes our panel, and thank you all for joining, and thank you for wisdom you shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. OK， 那现在呢是我们的下午茶时间。那我们现在时间呢是3点35分。那我们的午茶时间呢是到3点55分。那我们这边有很多精美的茶点在我们外面，请大家过去享用。我们的下一个议程呢是会在3点55分开始。那议程的题目是 Private Key Security and Protection。那我们会邀请到 Tim、CTO、Seppo 来做分享。We're going to take a tea break right now. And please come back at 3:55. We'll prepare afternoon tea outside, and you can grab a coffee or tea, just enjoy yourself and chat with the fellow attendees.
声的那种吗？两个声音来源，一个是麦克风接过来的声音，然后另外是讲音乐我刚刚记不记得刚刚有个讲录像？啊？刚刚记不记得讲录像？一个老美国人，然后这个开场的时候讲的蛮有人叫懂啊？他认识一下呀，南台湾，我昨天还会过来，啊？什么？对啊。你看那个名字的那个将来，他对在那个 our 就是刚 QR code 的那个可以丢给我一下。丢给我，可是我给你基本上现在要了吧？要另可以啊。我另我没有另，就只有 QR code 网址啊，这是网址啊。没有 QR code 啊，这网址啊。哪里有网址？这网页不是网址吗？这个对啊，那不是那个。比较有效，要放到，他都写一起吧。就他那个下面也有官方的。他那原来说那个特地方面原来会讲。哦，他会，他是之后自己讲，然后就是过了几年。是因为是北京语。是哦。就是我记得他好像某一年突然间，他说他在练习手势，对，他很厉害，他在上一次 Crossing 2017的时候，不是 Crossing 就是2年前那个什么 Beyond，2017 Beyond Block， 就是 Beyond Block 对2017年的时候，比他可以来讲，他是讲中文，他整个 section 讲中文，还有只有部分而已，不是吗？我现在讲完9了。基本上他后面就到了台湾嘛，还蛮厉害的。对啊，因为我是有学中文啊，学的还蛮零零落落的。那一年直播还被中文到的。我搜寻，昨天才搜寻的。OK， 就是怪的。那一开始19岁就搞了这个。对，因为我那时候我那时候是用以前的意思，可是我刚才觉得他那个。他应该是发起这个project，然后呢，对开放，然后后来就是去截取，然后记得在发第一个那个叫做 出10块的时候，好像里面不止它一个，那一个。
现在这边这个哔哩哔哩啊，对啊，
真的哦，
下午
对啊，然后有人吗？
6月才知道，
就是各种配，然后可以。那我们都有 logo。
那时候没有我们的，是他们是他连这里也给你们，这里
我没有，他们就喜欢这样的。因为毕竟还是有分成那个年代的。
这个人，我们看看这个人到底把自己有兴趣的东西，他把有兴趣的东西拿出来。
刚才录影那个，
兴趣好像没有反应，兴趣好像没有反应。需要的。
主要是非常用嘛。
是啊。他现在就开这个页面，就在他旁边，他不会啊。
That's great because now I also have another business. My business is going to be crypto wallet.
这边吗？
这边的公司有点像Singapore next. Taiwan not yet, but
对技术应用在金融不是在
不行啊。
Yeah, merchants to be traded there.
没有，
别人在金融。
啊？变掉了。
应该是有用吧。
没有变掉，那就剩下官方要自己发自己的空档，就跟区块链有关。等一下是先放这个。到底在巴黎是要吃什么？
我干嘛？
对啊，
你说今天吗？不是，
没有，不是今天。
今天我不会。
大家好，我们的下一个议程即将在3分钟之后开始，还请大家尽快入座。Ladies and gentlemen, our next session will start in 3 minutes, so please take your seats and be prepared.
就是我后来有跟那个宾你确认过，就是大概2个礼拜，然后因为那时候我在工作，那时候我还日本，所以我会先陆续把处理好影片就入场。然后设成快速。
我们的下一个议程呢，叫做 Private Key Security and Protection， 私钥的安全与保护。 那我们请大家尽快入座。我们的议程将会在2分钟之后开始。我们还请在外面享用下午茶的朋友们，可以进来我们这里喽。我们的议程即将开始了。那我们还有很多时间让大家做互动。那我们的议程呢，将在准时开始。OK， 好。那接下来呢，让我们欢迎我们的下位讲者 Cybervo 的 CTO Tim 徐来为我们做分享。分享的题目是 Private Key Security and Protection 私钥的安全与保护。让我们掌声欢迎 Tim。
好，谢谢美丽的主持。大家好，我听说今天大家都听了满满的英文，所以我们用中文OK， 好，那其实听了整个下午，应该听到这边大家有点这个疲倦，对不对？刚刚尤其吃了东西，会有点想睡，没关系就你们不要太大声，我尽量不要吵你们。OK， 那对我现在在 Sababo 当 CTO， 然后我每年有举办一个台湾骇客年会，叫 HackerCon，目前已经办了15年。那如果各位对骇客、对 security 有兴趣，不妨可以搜寻一下 HackerCon， 然后我们有 Facebook 可以加。我现在在币托还有 Bitcoin 交易所，还有 OTC BTC， 还有一些交易所，不过已经倒了对，就不要说了OK， 然后对，好，那不是我的关系OK， 好，那我今天要讲的是私钥的保护的观点。那我不会从developer 的角度来看，我主要会从 IT security 的角度来看这个私钥保护的一些架构那希望大家听一听，回去对各位有所帮助。好，那我因为刚刚讲到交易所，所以我们就先从交易所的一些故事开始谈起。OK， 就是说我要谈就是说交易所在处理这个币的时候那我们都知道我们喜欢用交易所，然后我们会把很多的币放在交易所，我们就会担心交易所的private key 的保护是不是得当。那我们先讲一下，我们把币放在交易所以后，它的大概的过程。那它大概过程就是如果假设我要把1枚比特币到交易所的话，那交易所会告诉你说你的位置，比特币的位置例如这边是有5AC 开头的一个位置那你就把1枚比特币转进去了，从下面这样看起的话，这样可以把这个东西 OK，EPT 转到这个位置。那这个呢，这个大框框就是一个交易所。那你把它转到交易所的这个钱包位置以后，那交易所会有程式在 monitor 说1枚比特币转到这个位置。那它会做2件事情。第一件事情是把这个位置的比特币清空，转到另外一个位置这个位置是一个水库的概念，这个就是交易所的金库的概念。所有的钱都会放到这边，所以你个别的人存到不同的位置以后，他都会把它转到一个类似大水库、金库这样子。然后这边清空了以后呢，因为你是存 EBTC 进来，所以它会在你的资料库，它会